There are examples we know. I'll just point to two. Let's just say the attempted overthrow of the Ukrainian government in 2014. You can go back to Iran-Contra as yet another example, and you can add gain-of-function research now, which is, again, I'll just go back to when there are these lifelong bureaucrats that believe they're above the law, that there's this sensation that they can pull the levers of power silently behind the scenes because they know better. And then what they're doing, as you guys said, is they are controverting the desires of the people. So whether you like President Obama or not, he's duly elected by the people. And when he says this isn't allowed, it shouldn't be allowed. And when you instantiate chaos and wars and all of this other stuff, overthrows in all of these other places that then create all these long tail effects, they're not done with really America support. They're done by a small group of people who think they know better. And I think that we've created that kind of a problem that needs to get fixed. And so I think that this has to be an example where you can make them an example, because otherwise it will keep happening. And there are other parts of the American bureaucracy where people are in charge of very critical and important decisions. And I suspect 99% of them are good, earnest, honest people doing the right thing for America. But it's just the law of large numbers. There will be one or two, and all it takes is one or two, who get drunk with that power. And so unless that there's a check and balance on that dynamic, we'll have more issues of this. And as the world gets more sophisticated and we rely more on experts, I hate to say this, guys, but you have to be more skeptical of experts. As much as you think an expert is an expert, you have to fight the tendency of saying, I'm going to abdicate all of my intellect onto you and you decide.
Yeah.
I think you have to find a way of just gut checking. And Sachs said this critical thing. If I was the president of the United States in a pandemic, I didn't need the COVID to teach me this example. But if I'm trying to solve a very technical and hard engineering problem, what I always do is I bring a cross-section of people in a room. Typically, some of them have to have disagreeing opinions, and I make them intellectually fight it out.
Yep.
And my job is to observe. And in that, I apply my judgment. I'm not nearly as smart as them. I'm not nearly technically as trained as them. But that is a process that works. And I'm just questioning, it couldn't have happened here because, as Sachs said, if you basically bury the reputations of the folks that are pushing back, you could never bring them inside the room in the Oval and have a conversation with them and say, hey, Jay Bhattacharya, give us the red team version of what you think is happening.
Yeah.
And that
Steel
is a
man
real
the
problem.
argument. Yeah.
Steel man the opposite side.
Let me build on a point Chamath made, which is, I think we have to ask the question, what type of government do we really have? You know, we call ourselves a democracy, but are you a democracy when the elected leaders come and go and the really powerful bureaucrats running the government, running these agencies, stay for decades and decades? And if the president disagrees with their policy, they can just wait them out. Fauci wanted to do gain-of-function research, maybe, by the way, at the behest of DOD. We don't know. Could have been a bioweapon or biodefense program. There's a lot more to this that we don't even know about yet. In any event, it's clear he was passionately committed to funding gain-of-function research. He just waited for his opportunity and implemented his will. Victoria Nuland in the State Department, passionately committed to basically bringing Ukraine into NATO and using that to essentially provoke a regime change operation in Russia. Again, she just had to wait for her opportunity to basically keep pushing these policies for decades. These are the people who are really running the American government.
How would you change it? We have to turn these things over, these organizations, or get rid of them.
We talk about term limits for politicians. Maybe we actually need term limits for the administrative apparatchik that runs all these critical organizations.
Right. It's called the deep state, right? You ever hear the expression deep state? It sounds conspiratorial. It's not. It's just the permanent bureaucracy. We elect a president, but how many people does the president actually appoint? A couple hundred? 99.9% of the people running the government are there permanently.
Well, and then I'll just say here, I want to give a shout out to the journalists, Catherine Eban and Emily Kopp. I know that people also have no faith in journalists. These are two journalists I think you could have tremendous faith in and who are going to win Pulitzers because they've been doggedly pursuing this. And you have to wonder why this is not the top story on the news networks and why this isn't the head of the New York Times or the Washington Post. Like, there needs to be much more coverage of what's going on here. I don't understand why this isn't what
because
we're doing. Yeah, because Trump takes every headline. Yeah.
I don't think it has anything to do with Trump. I think it's got everything to do with the fact that the New York Times was covering for Fauci. Fauci's been there. Yeah. Fauci's been there for decades. He is a major source for the New York Times, just like he was a major funder of grant programs, right? So there's a lot of people who have developed a dependency on Fauci. I mean,
for information, you think access journalism is what's going on here? He gave them access.
There's no question that the New York Times was covering for this. The New York Times definitely promoted the idea that anyone pushing the lab leak theory was somehow a conspiracy theorist or a nut.
And you have to lay on top of all this, Sachs, it's a political environment.
They were pushing that whole crazy wet market theory. And
the wet market theory.
Pangolin.
The pangolin. Remember the pangolin?
We needed Jon Stewart to dismantle the pangolin theory.
In relation to that, these wet markets have spread massive viruses and all kinds of things. And they do need to be. There was like a UN report on hey, we have to upgrade these. People have to stop doing wet markets.
That's why it was a great cover story. I don't know that
it was a great cover story. I think it was a logical theory to pursue to the end point of eliminating it, because around Wuhan, there are a lot of these wet markets. It is completely conceivable that a person who was in that lab went to a wet market and it spread via the wet market. This is why we need a full investigation, folks, because all these theories could come together and there are more cards to turn over, which one of you alluded to, who knows what the turn in the river are going to be here? What did China know? What did our government and China know? Maybe they are making bioweapons. Maybe they're doing even worse stuff that we don't know about. Maybe there's all kinds of rogue programs that are occurring here. That's why we need to keep digging and digging. The American public must hold these people accountable, and they need to tell us who else was involved. Because if Fauci's involved and this guy's involved, there's other people. I want to hear from everybody.
There's many crazy parts of this, but I think maybe the craziest part of the whole thing is that when the pandemic happens and the elected government of the United States, the president, needs to pull in the resources to manage a policy response, who do they pull in? Fauci, the guy who created the problem. It's kind of like when they have Nuland be our chief diplomat in the State Department, and she's fomented the coup in Kiev in 2014. It's, again, these bureaucrats are doing the exact opposite of what they're supposed to be doing.
They have to take ownership of this and being honest, yes.
But I think, to answer your question, what do we do about it? I think we just got to clean out the stables here.
Yeah.
I think we just got to disband some of these government departments. Why do we have so many? This whole alphabet soup of three-letter agencies. I think Vivek Ramaswamy had the right idea. Let's just get rid of a bunch of these things.
Zero-based budget, the whole government.
Start over. Yep. And just go right through each one. And you know what? It should be a bipartisan issue, but there's so much money involved. And this is one of the challenges in a capitalist system, is there's so much money, there's so much grift to go around, that when something like this happens and there's an opportunity to, make a vaccine and put a couple of $1 billion into this Lightspeed thing, which was a great idea, seemingly, everybody lines up. Okay, yeah, sure, we'll get involved. We'll take some of that money. Yeah, buy 1 billion shots from us.
President Trump was really onto this because he's the one that really coined the term the deep state and went after it. And if you think about the other side, right, the people that are there, it must be very discomforting to hear, because a lot of those people are folks that worked hard, tried to go to good schools, get educated, and join an infrastructure to move a country forward because they believe in the country and the values of America.
Sounds like a noble mission, right?
But over long periods of time, most people come and go, and then there's a small cohort of folks that sort of end up ossifying and running the top parts of this permanent bureaucracy. And I think Sachs is right. They start to observe just the simple principle that all these folks come and go, yet I'm still around. President comes, president goes. Undersecretary comes, undersecretary goes. The secretary of this comes, then they go. And so they start to believe that they're really in charge. And that's where the deep state idea comes from.
At least we're in a democracy where these hearings are occurring. I just want to give kudos to, in addition to those two journalists, to the people on this subcommittee who are doing it in a bipartisan way, and they're being relentless. I think that's the honorable thing to do. I encourage them and those investigative journalists to be relentless.
And kudos to Rand Paul too. Remember when he
was profiling courage? People were like, "This guy's a loon."
No, Rand Paul had it right.
To your point about what does this mean for our democracy, I want to just bring up the Semaphore article where they polled young people and young voters, they despair over U.S. politics. They describe the United States as a dying empire led by bad people.
I mean,
now, after what we've learned about COVID, and I would argue also the whole background to the Ukraine war, is this right? Exactly.
Their intuition is right.
Yeah, from the mouths of babes. I mean, if they covered this up in the way it's looking like, I would call this behavior not bad. I'd call it evil because it was premeditated.
And then, look, the point is, we're supposed to have this check and balance from the media, but when the media is complicit because they like to be in those halls of power, that's where these feelings come from. I think the latest stat that I saw is more than 52% of Americans now believe that the mainstream media is untrustworthy. And that's a really terrible place to be, which means you're basically...
Where do you get truth?
You're consuming something that's just fundamentally not true.
I mean, burn it down. I mean, that's the conclusion any logical person would come to, is just burn it down. This makes no sense that they would try and cover this up. The right thing for Fauci to do is say, hey, listen, we didn't do gain of function, under Obama. We did do it here. It's obviously been a mistake. We need to never do it again. And here's the roadmap to make sure that we protect people from the next one. Thank God this one didn't kill children the way it's killing old people. And by the way, this is going to crack open. I encourage you all to be vocal about this and to watch on Monday, because Dr. Fauci is scheduled to appear in a hearing for this same subcommittee. And that is going to be explosive.
Live streamed on YouTube. We'll put the link in the show notes.